broadband, the connection's not so good in Arizona.
You'd think they'd be better in Arizona.
Not gigabit yet.
I stepped away.
Okay.
We have gigabit here, so we're good.
Yeah. Okay.
We are live on Facebook. I see it.
What's that? We are live on Facebook. Okay, we are live, everyone. It's Friday. It's your favorite Friday evening habit, or Friday afternoon, depending where you are in the country. Welcome to Dr. Policy and Political Architect Show. We are joined today by our newest member, a real-life doctor, Dr. John Vanderhoff. How are you doing, John?
Good afternoon, everyone.
And we are also joined by Jeff Thornton. Jeff Thornton is an IT security professional, solving crimes, keeping the bad guys off your servers. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have Jackie Sackstein, who is no longer in the great state, the not as great a state of New Jersey as it was when Christie was governor, but the okay state of New Jersey, who's now in the great state of Maryland.
Happy to be back.
And then we have the dean of media biases in Washington politics, Donald Irvine. How are you doing, Don?
Always glad to be here, Dwight. Are we ready to go?
Yeah, we are ready to go. Yeah.
All right, let's do it, guys. All right, 4 days until the election. So that'll be the backdrop for a lot of what we do tonight and talking about the various issues. But I can't believe we've actually gotten to this point. And we're, hopefully everybody has got their election predictions that we'll do closer to the end of the show as well. If not, think about it while we're talking. The other thing about it too is that I'm going to bring up tomorrow's holiday, because we've been going through 7 months of stuff and we've talked about various holidays as the show has been going on. And tomorrow is a little bit of a different one, and that is Halloween. But what is Halloween going to be under COVID? I'm still sitting here in my neighborhood thinking, like, I haven't heard, except for one neighbor, what their plans are for Halloween. We don't have a lot of kids in our neighborhood anymore. As things age, the number of kids have dropped off considerably. But I'm not really sure what I'm going to see tomorrow. Am I going to see kids?
I'm pretty sure the county said no trick-or-treating.
Well, they've encouraged it, right? At least,
okay.
Right. Go ahead.
So are we going to have trick-or-treaters or not? I mean, I got full-size candy bars that are going to go to waste. I'll have to send them to Jackie or somebody.
Right, we didn't buy the full-size candy bars because of this year.
I will say what's interesting is when you're growing up in elementary school, and they always show you that they have, I don't know if it's the same in every state, but they have this little like police dog who comes on, the little cartoon
McGruff?
dog. Yeah, McGruff. Yeah, and he's like, don't wear masks on Halloween because they obscure your eyesight and you'll trip and die. And now they're telling you wear a mask if you're going to go out on Halloween. So
McGruff will be telling everyone, take a bite out of COVID, put on a mask. But
even to your point, Jackie. I mean, there even though it wasn't the same type of mask, there was a big thing about not having kids wear masks, right, at all. That was too scary, or who knows, all kinds of different things, that were going on here. And now, if they come trick or treating, it's going to be kind of an interesting thing, in the end. I'm still not really sure what I should be doing, Dwight. I mean, what's the consensus here? Is like, should I have a bag of regular size, not the full size candy, because we thought, we weren't going to do that, but I'm ready to hand out candy on the one hand, but I'm not sure anybody's going to show up. We only get 15
you could do
an average year anyway.
Something that I saw Scrooge McDuck taking the lead from Scrooge McDuck. He took a bowl of candy and put a sign, take one, and he goes, oh my, somebody took the last candy. Who could it have been? Sorry, and left an empty bowl out front of his house.
That's always how that goes. But I would say you probably have to, they probably want you to individually package each one, separate them 6 feet apart on your lawn, and just go pick one up.
I've got a fairly powerful rubber band gun. I could stand on my porch and shoot off candy to the kids.
I have the one neighbor in the neighborhood on the listserv, that said they were trying to elicit some response from the rest of the neighborhood, and I saw nothing except for her response. Is that she was planning on making up some kind of treat bags, and they were going to have a table, and she and her husband were going to be in the end of their driveway and just hand them out. And it's like, I don't know. I think it's going to be in the 40s or something like that tomorrow. I'm not doing that.
So John, don't you wish it was 40 degrees in Arizona right now? Are you guys doing trick or treating?
We'll dip into the 40s, but we're in an older neighborhood as well, so we're not going to get many anyway. But I think people here are sick and tired of masks, sick and tired of being inside, sick and tired of our governor kind of locking certain things down. I think we're going to have trick-or-treaters going through. People that are obviously nervous about COVID will stay home, and the ones that are not will come out, and we will have candy for them.
What about the idea of like a Halloween pod for the kids with 2 or 3 neighbors or whatever, and they just do something there? I mean, that may wind up being
a couple of neighbors. They I think all drove into like a parking lot and they opened their trunks and all the kids got to trick or treat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people are doing that too.
Yeah, I saw.
Wow.
To get the kids
our
out.
church normally does that with the kids, but they eliminated all that this year. Just it's been that kind of a weird year where all these traditions have just gone by the wayside out of an abundance of caution or an overabundance of caution.
And the other thing I've been thinking about, and this is a little bit more nefarious, is the fact that, you know, we are back to seeing more protests and riots. There was another police shooting, which we're going to get to later in Philadelphia. But then there was also that idea of, with the election coming up, because I want to mention this too, and Dwight, you'll think this is hilarious. GW sent out an email to its students the other day, basically telling them, please prepare for election day as if you were preparing for a snowstorm. Buy enough food for a week, refill your prescriptions, try not to go out, like telling that there's probably going to be riots from whatever outcome of the election is on Tuesday and then the days following Tuesday, depending on how things turn out. Well, so I'm wondering, with that kind of unrest also, and the inclusion of a lot of people wearing masks and face coverings, are there going to be some less savory people who are probably a lot older and don't really look like children even with a mask on, but some less savory people who might use trick-or-treating or the holiday as an excuse to go out and get closer to people's houses and cause violence, particularly if they see signs in people's yards?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, Jackie, because I actually saw something from the Telegram thing that we have going with AIM, and one of our staffers lives in Portland. And she said something very similar to what you're just saying. There's a huge run going on now of like toilet paper, the whole 9 yards, because of these potential threats and all these things that are coming up. So it's not just the GW thing, but it's interesting to see that we're seeing this on both coasts, and who knows where the heck else it's going on there. But yeah, you know, Halloween, yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, now masks are kind of required. That also leads to a lot of potential mischief.
Well, that's
Let me say real quick too. I was, as you probably know before, I was from Michigan for, been there for about 20 years. So typically in Detroit, that area, like arson kind of increases during Halloween. So that's kind of a thing that down there. I'm kind of curious to know how
that's a Michigan thing. They set fires on Halloween.
I don't know. It's like, well, you've seen like the Ohio State, Michigan rallies where they like, tip cars and burn things. Maybe arson's like the national pastime down in the Midwest, but any case, I'd be kind of curious to see how things are in Detroit just, this year, because again, traditionally that's been, and I don't know if it was like, not necessarily a riot. It's just that arson seemed to be up whenever Halloween is around. So,
Jeff, what you just described was Philadelphia after the Eagles won the Super Bowl.
Or Maryland after we beat Duke.
Halloween is a great excuse for mischief and mayhem,
Yep.
right? I mean, that's what happens in a lot of cases. So, I mean, I kind of wonder, like, Georgetown is famous for, young people going in there and stuff like that. I don't know what anything is going to be like, but I'm sure some of this will be a little bit calmer, but I guess the police are still ready and waiting in case of anything, anywhere at this point in time. All right, moving on.
Yes.
Let's talk about the GDP, because the GDP numbers were very good, came out the other day, 33.1% was, and a record. They've been keeping records apparently since about 1947. And so that offset a dramatic drop in the second quarter. So, and one of the interesting things about this is just that it was a huge number for which economists were predicting, because they knew that things were going pretty well. But, we did have the stimulus payments. We did have that extra $600 a week, and unemployment checks, but they were kind of front end loaded. I mean, that wasn't done during the entire quarter at all times, right? The unemployment thing, I think, didn't run out at the end of July. So you still had part of the quarter, you still have a good part of the quarter without that. It kind of makes me wonder, in terms of, are we going, when we talk about stimulus and things like that, is that something that we're going to be needing? And the other part of it too is that while these numbers were good, there was a report that CNN and MSNBC ignored this. They didn't want to report on this. Now, they were all over the down number from the second quarter, but this up number doesn't seem to fit with their narrative in this campaign season.
Right. And then I've also seen that the markets have been reflecting recently a downward trend, reflecting that they think Biden is going to potentially win the election, and that's why it's going downwards in some respects. So, I mean, definitely, I think it's obvious that that a lot of the mainstream media is ignoring the upward trends because it doesn't fit their narrative. But in terms of what you were mentioning on stimulus, I think that we probably will, even after the election, I don't care what Nancy Pelosi is trying to do, we're probably still going to need some other form of stimulus because, we're starting to see a second wave coming. There's a lot of states are already talking about shutting things down again, or, in Montgomery County, Mark Elrich is looking into whether or not he can legally make Uber Eats and DoorDash lower their delivery prices because he thinks that might save restaurants if he restricts indoor dining again.
My God. Mark Elrich, he may as well just run as a communist. I mean, come on, controlling the price controls for
right.
Uber
I mean,
Eats,
he thinks it's going to save restaurants. Like, I'll tell you right now.
I know what can save restaurants right now. Cut the damn taxes. Your property taxes are too high in Montgomery County. Cut the taxes for business to doing business in Montgomery County. Yeah. Mark Elrich, stop trying to regulate free enterprise.
So we are going, I think, to continue to see. I know right now the number of people reporting for joblessness is getting lower, but I do think that we might see another turn in that depending on how the winter goes. I know Disney just laid off another couple hundred employees. I think we're going to keep seeing changes like that. I think, quite honestly, I'm pretty sure that the movie industry might tank altogether, but we'll see what happens.
I mean, here's the thing. I'm not going to shed any tears for Hollywood Hollywood elitists who basically hate America go under,
Look, I might not like their politics, but I need something to watch in quarantine. There's only so many Twitch streamers that I can watch.
YouTube has some great content on there. You should watch our Direct Line show from the other night with Governor Allen. It was awesome.
Yeah, just what we want to do is binge Direct Line.
We've been doing that for over 6 months. There's
if that was the case, Dwight, we'd have it behind a paywall at this point.
Yeah, I believe in disseminating our information without.
Jackie, I know you're big on the theater and the arts and stuff like that. So I want to ask you this question because you mentioned Disney and all of these things. Is that one of the questions I have or thoughts that I've been having about all of this is just that what the long-term effect is going to be on whether or not it's Broadway or Hollywood and their movie making, because there's been a lot of big budget Hollywood movies, and a lot of them are already in the pipeline. They're ready to go. They haven't been, they haven't put most of them out yet. They've been delaying the release of those. But what do you think, in terms of what the future holds for this? Is that, will we still see any kind of big budget movies, like that? Can they afford to do that? Are the risks going to be too high? I mean, because if if the movie theaters don't really recover, you can only sell this kind of thing so much streaming. How Mulan is on with Disney Plus, and so
I think that they can. I mean, they tested it.
Shut down.
They tested it with Mulan. They put that one behind a $30 pay-on-demand paywall for the first few months. It was, I think, and it's $30 per household. So it's obviously they're not making individual ticket sale kind of money. But I think that you have enough of a devoted fan base for a lot of the Disney properties, so Marvel, Star Wars, that people would pay that kind of money to stream on. Look, I will pay $100 right now to get all the Marvel movies that I've missed this year. I really want to watch Black Widow already. And even if that means I'm not getting that same experience of being in the theater and getting the surround sound, like, I think that there's enough of a demand for new content, and particularly Marvel and those kinds of big budget action movies, that people will pay for them.
I'm just having a hard time that if Hollywood is spending $250 million to produce a film, they got to pay all these actors these huge salaries and all that stuff. I just have a hard time believing that they're going to really be able to monetize that. I mean, there was a story I heard about the Bond movie that's been delayed till next year. Is that apparently the studio was trying to shop it around to see if they could get somebody to buy it, but I think they were looking for like $650 million, and no one in their right mind was going to pay that kind of money to possibly just use it so they could stream it, because you can't make money, if you're going to pay that kind of money. And so they pulled it back, and they're still set for theatrical release. But I mean, I just have a feeling, I think the economics of this, along with everything else, is changing. Mentioning how people are being laid off. This is kind of that ticking time bomb. No matter who's the president, they've got to figure out how to deal with this.
It's time for the return of the drive-in theater.
Here, let's do this. John, you're a physician. There's a vaccine in the works. If you got vaccinated, would you feel comfortable going into a movie theater?
I've already been to the movie theater.
Oh, that's what you're in Arizona. You guys have
In this
freedom.
environment, so it doesn't bother me at all.
You guys
If we're going to switch over to COVID, I mean, my take on Hollywood is let the left eat their own. You've got a bunch of left elitists that are saying we need to do all this stuff to America. Let's let America do this back to them. We get rid of content. They drop their house values. They're selling big properties. They're doing whatever they need to do to survive, and then they start feeling like us again.
They're all going to leave the country anyway if Trump wins again, right?
Oh yeah,
right. I wish they would just do that.
And
why don't they follow through on their word?
Promises.
Remember Bill O'Reilly said he'd buy their plane tickets if they didn't come back?
I have zero sympathy for those guys, and I love watching movies. I'm a huge movie buff, and I love the Avengers. I love the Marvel Universe and Disney and everything they all stand for. I just don't like their politics, and if their politics lead us down this path, then let's see it go and follow through, and let's see what happens to these guys. Let them sit at home begging for money for a change instead of being so elitist and thinking they know better than everybody.
Yeah, but honestly, going to the movies is a lot. If the numbers are to be believed, sitting in a movie theater socially distanced with your mask on the entire time is probably safer than going out to eat, theoretically.
But
I've done both in Arizona. In my opinion, if we're going to switch gears to COVID, in my opinion, Mother Nature calls. And Mother Nature has designed this virus, whether it's been partially designed by the Chinese or whatever, but Mother Nature and a virus ain't going anywhere. The human race cannot beat Mother Nature. And in my opinion, as a medical professional, every single one of us is going to have either been exposed to COVID or get sick from it.
Thank you. That was totally my take on it too. And I did not go to med school, nor do I plan on.
And there have been a lot of studies that take completely asymptomatic people off the streets and test them for antibodies. And I mean, this was done months ago. There was a study done in LA and in New York where 20% of the folks have already been exposed. So we have millions and millions and millions of people that have been exposed already to this COVID, and we're going to be relatively immune to it. And the COVID, and the more people they get infected, the less lethal this disease will be. And we can see it today. People are still dying, but they're all old and sick people. Very, very few people are dying if they're relatively healthy. And certainly under the age of 70, there's an overwhelming majority. I think 99% are surviving this. Yeah. And Trump himself, he got it and he was better within 48 hours. My son got it, he was better in 12 hours.
So can I ask this? Go ahead. I was going to ask, so as a physician, my take from the initial narrative was that, we weren't necessarily trying to prevent all COVID cases, but trying to flatten the curve so that the medical professions could handle the cases as they came in, as opposed to everyone not caring and everyone getting infected all at once. Is that
number of cases? The curve was number of hospitalizations. There's a really big difference there.
Well, so I can go over some of that because I live in the world. When this virus first came out, we knew it was a coronavirus, and the SARS epidemic was also a coronavirus. And so we felt at the time, if the coronavirus are similar across the years between SARS and what we have now, what we call COVID, there's a very high death rate for folks that got SARS. Up to 40% in young, healthy people. So I can understand, and I understand the reluctance of running the economy and just moving forward when you have up to a 40% death rate, and it was highly, highly, highly contagious back then, right? We had a lot of people dying in Italy and Spain and of course in China. So we shut down the economy. I think we all agreed we needed to do that. We also felt that we were poorly equipped to handle a mass pandemic with thousands of people going to the hospital sick and dying, like we saw in Italy. So we said, let's flatten the curve, right? We always heard that. Fauci talked about that. Trump talked about that. We all said, let's flatten the curve so we can ramp up industry. We can get the Production Act in place so we can get Ford to make ventilators and Chevy to make ventilators and Budweiser making hand sanitizer. And you've got all these folks mobilizing the troops, masks and gowns and goggles and everything imaginable to flatten the curve. We were never in a position where a single person that needed a ventilator didn't get one. We were never in a position where a healthcare provider that needed a mask or a gown did not have one. Now, were people still dying? Yes. It's still a terrible disease. It afflicted a lot of older folks, and in particular New York and some of the blue states in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and New Jersey and so forth. We really saw a higher death rate. Almost all of them were nursing home patients and really elderly patients. We didn't understand the disease very well. We didn't understand the therapeutics very well. Is it hydroxychloroquine? Is it remdesivir? Is it XYZ? We really didn't understand the disease. Now that we understand the disease a lot better, we have a lot better therapeutics. And in the process, we have this vaccine created. We've completely flattened the curve. Case rates are going up, but the case rates are going to continue going up over the next year or two. But what is the death rate doing? The death rate is plummeted. It's less than 1%. And it's less than 0.1% if you're under the age of 50 or 60, which is laughable. I mean, we probably have more accidents from cars and heart attacks and
regular flu,
full accidents than we
getting suicide from being on lockdown.
And so what do? We're quarantining healthy people, which is just stupid, in my opinion. If you're going to quarantine the sick and the elderly and the frail, good idea. If you're going to quarantine somebody that has the disease, not a bad idea. But what about the unafflicted? What about the person that has immunity? What about the person that has already had COVID? He should be able to be a productive member of society and get back to life as he knows it.
I read an article earlier that said Dr. Fauci said something along the lines of, assuming that a majority of the population gets the vaccine, that we would return to quote unquote normal life, but whatever the new normal is, looking at end of 2021, beginning of 2022.
Yeah, he said about a year and a half.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting, and especially because, and I heard this interesting take on basically saying what you're saying, which is like, we can't just sit around waiting to die. We need to go back and live our lives. God will take us when it's our time to take us. But, and this was all coming from a nurse's perspective. And she also said something like, particularly regarding the vaccine, is you have a bunch of anti-vaxxers out there who refuse to get vaccines that have been tried and true for decades and decades. You think they're going to take one that's been rushed through the trial? I mean, my dad, again.
And we have the Democrat nominee for president.
100 million other people get it first.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrat nominee for president and vice president are on that anti-vaxxer train. I mean, Joe Biden refuses to take the vaccine if it's available. I mean, that is reckless and that is harmful.
Well, let's even take a step back. I mean, people are waiting for this virus to go away. I mean, everyone knows what HIV is. We all lived in that era since the 80s.
Yeah.
It's still around. It's not disappeared. Hepatitis has been around for 100 years. Hepatitis.
You have the therapeutics and you live with it.
Yeah, and this has been part of my complaint, John. It's just that, watching as much media as I wind up doing during the day, during the week.
For you.
It's just, particularly with CNN, it's like, CNN is always running all the figures. But as I have said time and time again on this show and other places, there's no context to this. I mean, they're just using these raw numbers and they're trying to beat into people's heads, just like the Democrats are doing, Biden and Harris was, that there's this huge amount of deaths, that President Trump is responsible for all these things, and that if you elect us, if you do what we want you to do, we're going to, in essence, they're trying to convince people that they're going to go to zero.
Yeah.
And people with any common sense knows that that's not going to happen. Yeah. I mean, we're going to live with this.
And Don, let me take a trip back down memory lane. But when President Bush was president, CNN was doing a daily body count, which stopped the minute Barack Obama became president. I mean, I have no doubt that CNN will stop the daily body counts if Joe Biden manages to win next Tuesday. Heaven help us all if he does.
What will happen is he will say a vaccine is imminent. Biden took over and really got everyone mobilized and ready to go with the vaccine. And the death rate is plummeted, so there's no reason to discuss it anymore. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Biden
exactly.
has saved the day.
I mean, they did that to President Bush about the Gulf War, and they're doing that to President Trump.
But I mean, Dwight, I mean, you're right about that. But I think that what the media is doing these days is really the height of irresponsibility. Some of the worst things I have seen in my lifetime in terms of this. They are so in the tank, for Biden, Harris, the Democrats, all of these people, that they are just totally blinded by this. Their hatred for Trump is so high that they will lie, cheat, steal. They will do anything they can to the American public to tell them that, that the alternative of, a Democrat administration is going to be far better, and then life will be great and we'll be returning to normal at some point in time, and it'll happen a lot quicker if these guys get in versus if you keep the current administration in. But this is not President Trump's fault. I mean,
and
please tell me how a Democrat would have changed this narrative, for a virus that we didn't know anything about.
I never thought I'd say this, but I think the media was the way the media. I mean, President Trump is being treated worse than the media treated President Nixon. Because if you remember, this is almost like Vietnam era lie, cheat, and steal. Remember the Tet offensive CBS story about how
that was one of the worst things ever. Yes,
exactly. Or Gulf of Tonkin, it never happened. And they made that stuff up. And they're doing the exact same thing again. They're trying to bring down a president and they seem to think, oh, we brought President Nixon down, Yet they ignore Joe Biden's. Nobody refuses to cover the Joe Biden story about Hunter Biden, those emails.
Well, I want to segue to that for a second because it's really interesting. I read another thing that I thought was a really interesting theory is that now that everything is being confirmed by the Senate Judiciary, that the media is going to start picking up on this story because, and like right around the time of the election, because what they want is already it's too late for people to vote, to change their vote, even though actually one of the highest trending Google searches right now, since that the whole Hunter thing has happened, is can I change my vote? But is that they want to play up this idea that Biden is a criminal so that should he win the election, he will be forced to resign immediately so that they can get their true president in place that they want, which is Kamala Harris.
And who her running mate's going to be? AOC.
She's old enough to run yet.
Doesn't matter. They'll change the Constitution. If they want to impact the Supreme Court, do you really think they would stop at that? Oh, let's just lower the age for vice president to however old AOC is. What is she, 25? She's got to be 25. So or is she?
I think she's like 28 or 20. I don't know.
She's pushing 30.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think what you're saying, Jackie, is not unusual to what we've been seeing. A lot of this is that we've seen a lot of different threads, I think, out there about, because, Kamala's waiting in the wings. We've got Joe, who, if he wins, he would be the oldest president ever elected. And we already know that he gets pretty wonky, when he has to actually speak for more than about 10 minutes at a time. He goes way off the reservation and he kind of loses his train of thought. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy type of a person. I've always tried to avoid that. But, there is no doubt in my mind that, she's out waiting in the wings, and the Democrats are definitely looking for an opportunity to elevate her should they win, because, she has the longer term future for that. And voters need to remind themselves, it's like, you may think you're voting for Joe Biden, but you're really voting for Kamala Harris in the long run, because that's part of, I think that is part of their longer term plan for all of that. But on this laptop issue and the story issue, it's who's the person really fighting the fight on this? I think it has to be Tucker Carlson, who has just led this fight. Has put Tony Bobulinski on there and everything. This is driving the media crazy. But NPR and these other organizations are like, well, it's just not credible enough. But you mentioned the Senate committee, having looked into that, they verified it. Where have the denials been from the Biden campaign that says the emails are fake or false? They're not there.
They can't deny it because it's true.
Right. I mean, Don, you remember back in 2000, the media ran with the DUI then Governor Bush's DUI charge, or in 2004 the fraudulent documents about President Bush dodging the draft, not showing up for
National Guard. That was all that
National Guard, and I'm thinking they ran with that like it was the gospel, even after it was exposed as not being the gospel.
But that's part of the thing. I think anybody on this panel who's been watching the media for their life, and Jackie's the young gun here, on the show. But I think you can see that the pattern has been there for a long time. If it's against a conservative / Republican, the truth doesn't really matter first. It's a story, we jump on it.
Yeah.
If it's going to potentially harm a Democrat, they wait and they pull back and they try to cover it up, or they try to delay it going out until it finally finds its own way, out there. There's definitely a double standard when it comes to covering conservative and Republicans versus Democrats and liberals.
Well, back to what you were saying about Tucker Carlson, I was catching you guys up on this before the show started, but there was a report that Tucker was doing right before the Bobulinski interview. This came out, is that there were a bunch of documents they had that with really damning information about the Bidens, and I think they had it in their New York office because they like to verify the information before they go and report on it, and they backed all of it up to their computer, obviously, but then they had it on a USB drive, and they gave that USB drive they sent it through UPS. It's supposed to overnight mail to Tucker in LA, and that USB drive went missing somewhere en route. And Tucker reported on that, that night on the news, hey, my USB drive is missing. And UPS, basically calling out UPS, and UPS were like, oh, the next day, oh, we found it. It was in a room out of the envelope, mysteriously went missing in a room with no cameras. And because they could check, because the files were back up onto a computer, there were documents missing from the USB drive. So again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I happen to think that Tucker did this on purpose, because why would you mail sensitive information through UPS instead of using a private courier? But I think that it does show that there are people out there who are trying to circumvent that information. And it's entirely possible that they wanted to get that information to the left media, that they were able to control that narrative and spin some of the more damning stuff on there as false information.
Couldn't they just put that stuff in the cloud and then downloaded it from there? Wouldn't that have been?
They could have done that.
That's what I'm telling you. I don't think they're dumb enough to put the one and only copy and mail it through the mail. I think that's like any middle schooler would know not to
only
do.
Only a movie
they were
made
trying
by
to test the system.
only a movie made by Hollywood where they would have the only copy of the vaccine vial.
Right.
There's only one. They don't have any. They can't make any more either, and that's when they get stolen. It's only
Well, there's three separate tranches of information, right? You've got Hunter Biden's laptop. You got the guy that's currently in jail, who was Hunter Biden's associate, that gave his Gmail account to Pete Schweitzer, right? All that information. And then you've got Bobulinski's information. So you've got all three collaborating evidences coming together to create this very damning setup for Biden. And the left doesn't know any of this stuff. They just don't have access to this. Now, Hunter may say, I've got all this access and here it is, and take a look at it and see what we can do for damage control. And right now they can't say anything about it. Of course, Biden runs off the video, or runs off any camera as soon as somebody suggests anything about FBI investigations or Bobulinski. Oh, I'm done talking, right? And so they really have no comeback. And so someone took this flash drive, looked at everything to come up with their own version of the narrative. And so they didn't know all this stuff before. Of course, Congress knows about it. Schweitzer knows about it, who's written books about this kind of stuff. And of course, Bobulinski knows about it and Tucker knows about it. So it's going to be very interesting to see what all comes out. The question is it going to be too little too late?
It's Russian disinformation, right?
Of course.
But that's what I think
No
we're going to
evidence of
tie it
that.
up after the fact, because if it does come out that, if Biden does win the election, it comes out after the fact, because really, obviously, Hunter's not the one running for president. What they're trying to prove is that Biden knew everything that was going on and was actually a big part of this and was benefiting from it. They're going to want to use this information after the fact. One of two things: either Biden wins the election and the left uses this as a way to force him to resign, or the right uses as a way to force him to resign. I think either way that happens.
I'll tell you this. I really hope in a second Trump administration, the DOJ goes after the Biden family, go after them hard. I don't care if we have to throw Joe Biden in jail, quite frankly. We could send him down to Gitmo if we have to, quite frankly. They've got ways, I hear, down there to make people talk. Because that's what the left would do to any of us. They'd send us to Gitmo to war.
All right, so Dwight, what would happen if Biden wins the presidency, but the Republicans retain the Senate? Would the Senate still? Would you say the Senate will still try to investigate it? But it basically, with them just running solo against the two other, with the presidency and say the House in Democrat hands, it doesn't go anywhere, right?
No, it'd be kind of like if you remember the first 2 years of Clinton, you had the Whitewater, you had the banking scandals, all that stuff. travel office. The first 2 years we couldn't really do anything about it because we didn't have control of either house at that point. And
I want to get
similar to that.
I want to get everyone's take on this, but I want to bring Jeff into it because he's been quiet for the last few minutes. But I also read another article, one of Ben Shapiro's articles, which was the entirely possible scenario. It's unlikely, but in many cases, actually possible, that there is a tie in the Electoral College, and that even the step after that, that's supposed to break the tie, could still result in a tie or a stalemate. And what would happen in that situation is that we get President Nancy Pelosi, which quite honestly might be the most horrifying thing I've ever heard. But I'm curious to see your guys' thought on that, and that there is a
It's interesting you mentioned that about Nancy Pelosi coming on the eve of Halloween.
Yeah.
Definitely very scary.
That's what I see in my nightmares.
So your question is what would happen if there was a tie in the Electoral College?
Well, we know what would happen, or many people watching might not know. But also, what's your opinion on that? Do you think that it's possible? Do you think that there's any way that it does happen?
Well, I mean, I like playing with the 270 to win site, just to play with different scenarios and seeing how, states that are potentially in contention, the light pink or light blue states, if they swing, how that's going to look. And, I haven't played with it in a couple of weeks, but, the projections obviously are that Biden's ahead. So, play with the numbers, see what it would take for Trump to win. And you look at states like, Pennsylvania, Ohio, potentially Michigan, as being kind of the swing states in this thing. Arizona, probably, has a good chance of going red. It's still up in the air, but it's, that's definitely a toss up at this point. In when I played with it, I didn't really see, a tie, but what I'm worried about is that there's going to be enough close calls that it's going to, extend past, the Tuesday night time period, and people are going to be kind of pushing it like they want to know an answer. And my understanding of the Constitution is that they have 75 days to actually count the votes. But that being said, we've never gone that long. And I don't think people really want to wait that long. So the question is, how hard are the parties going to push each other to try to get, an actual vote that everyone can agree with? Because, I mean, we all have heard about like the state, elections that's down in Florida and stuff and how that's been. We don't want a repeat of that. So that for me is the worst case scenario, where it's close enough that we can't get a solid, where either Biden accepts or Trump accepts the results. And so we have this kind of, who knows? That's where I feel that we're going to get the riots and, all the, let's say, dissidents, but people that are upset about the, the situation really becoming more vocal.
Well, I tell you, Jeff, I think 2000 was the longest we had to wait to find out who the president was. As a result, we didn't get, the stock market didn't get the bump that it should have gotten after President Bush won in 2000. But I think here's what my scenario is I think if Joe Biden wins, I don't think our side's going to be rioting and burning cars and limousines.
I think that the super far right people in certain parts of the state might.
I don't think so. They're not going to do that. Okay, because we're better than they are, quite frankly.
On both sides,
and let me tell you, I think if the Democrats win, if the Democrats when they lose, they're going to be rioting. Let me tell you, they're boarding up businesses in downtown DC. We're not expecting some great big storm that they got to board up windows. They're doing it because they know if Trump wins, the left's going to riot and they're going to be burning cars and throwing trash cans through windows. And
right. To your point, Dwight, 2 weeks ago, I think you covered this a little bit, that like in California, there's record gun sales. And it's mostly been Democrats that have been buying guns. Yeah. And I just saw in the news that Walmart has actually stopped carrying ammo because they're, they're concerned as well. So, and the thing is, typically it's been like, and I hate to use generalities, I really do, but it's typically been like the alt-right that have been more militia based. Even in Michigan, you've always heard like the Michigan militia and those alt-right groups that are really, very much like, personal freedoms. Then you have, some of the, alt-lefts that are very much like, I wouldn't say anarchist, but basically, they don't want to, they're just much against the government, but in a different way. So again, you get these two volatile elements. There's going to be some clashing there. I think my gut feeling is that Democrats are trying to, secure their own safety because they feel that there's going to be unrest. That being said, I don't really know. It's just that it just takes, this is like a lot of kindling, a lot of gasoline. It's just going to take one match to set it off. And so that's my concern, is that it's going to be something that somebody does that's going to just incite this whole thing literally and cause it to blow up.
I think it's a little funny that Democrats are running around buying guns, considering they want to take away everyone else's guns,
Yeah, well, I think people need to understand that there's not going to be an answer on Tuesday night. And I think people have gotten spoiled by the fact that they typically have known for the past number of elections. They have known the answer on election night. But it's really actually, that's apparently very uncommon from what I've been reading. It's actually, that's not normal. It should take a couple, an extra day or two to get the answer. So, and I think, obviously, I think it's going to take longer than that, since some of the, I think there's a state where the deadline is they have until 9 days after the election to turn their ballot in, or something.
I think we're living in the industrial age. We've gotten spoiled. I think the last election we had to wait for more than a day. To may have been the race between McKinley and William Jennings Bryan. That may have been the last race where we didn't have instant news.
I think people are going to get antsy, and I think that's what's going to ratchet up.
Yeah. But here's the thing: these people. Then again, we're an ADD world, so to speak. People want everything now. People get antsy in Starbucks when they have to wait more than 5 minutes for their mocha frappuccino latte.
Mobile order solves the problem. Just go order in advance, go pick it up.
My parents didn't want me they're like, my dad or my mom told me last night, like, don't go out on Tuesday. I don't want you out during the election. And I'm like, well, first of all, we're not going to know anything. Second of all, that's all going on in the city. We're in Montgomery County. I think we'll be okay. I wasn't planning on going out anyway, because honestly, there's not going to be much to watch. We're not going to know anything.
Right. So let me just say a couple things about this. One, to Jeff's the thing about the Walmart. So Walmart has actually rescinded that decision. They have basically issued a statement saying that the unrest was isolated. So guns are going back in the stores. So that part of it has been resolved in that sense. But on the tying of the Electoral College, which was funny that you said that, is because I don't know if it was the same site, Jeff, or not. It's whatever that interactive map that shows up on Facebook, and I did a couple of rounds with it, and one of the things was I just punched in what I thought. I came up with 269 each, and then I said, oh, well, that's interesting. So what happens next? And, then the scenario there is just that, it would go to the next Congress and they get a vote based on who controls the state house, right? So it's not, it's not 435 congressmen voting, it's one per state. But that, if your state is Republican, then you're voting for the Republican probably, and Democrat. And as of right now, apparently, I guess the Republicans control the majority, but we have an election that, few state houses possibly could flip, and that could then say, if it gets to that point, maybe the Democrats would wind up winning that. But as far as they have a decision for the Electoral College, the vote is going to take place on December 14th, as per the Constitution. They actually have to have the election certified, I think, a week beforehand, so that the vote can take place. So we're talking about December 7th, December 8th, roughly. I think, can't remember the official date there. But by then, all the states have to certify the results, unless we're going to get to another, Bush v. Gore type of situation. But that was decided on December 12th. They made that, they made that decision before. So they ran that through and, got that decision, and before the constitutional provision, came into place, you now, before when the voting had to take place. So, we're going to know, we're definitely going to know by December, not that we want to really wait that long, but as you guys were saying, one of the problems is just that we have this uneven situation with some of the states in terms of when the votes can be counted. The Supreme Court has gotten involved. They said to Wisconsin,
right?
November 3rd, that's it. But to Pennsylvania, you can have an extra 3 days if it's been received.
North Carolina now too, evidently.
And I think
9 days.
I think Chris said last week, wasn't it? Didn't he say like 9 days or 12?
Yeah, nine.
Some ridiculous extension. The Republicans are trying to go back, hoping that maybe with Amy Barrett on there, but she just joined the court. She's going to need a little more time. They may go back and decide this after November 3rd. I heard that Pennsylvania, one of the things they're going to do, just in case, is that they're going to separate those other votes that they're counting that were received after November 3rd, even though, as long as they were postmarked and whatever other chicanery they want to have in there in Pennsylvania, so that I guess they could basically go back and nullify those votes if the Supreme Court comes back and says, no, they're invalid.
So
But
Don, let me ask you
that's
this.
another level of not craziness to me.
Let me make sure my understanding is correct. So in case of Wisconsin, because I saw that report too, my understanding, I may be incorrect in this, is that what the issue there was that the state legislature had set like a deadline for casting in ballots, but the Supreme Court with Wisconsin said because of the circumstances, they want to extend that. And that got appealed to the Supreme Court, which said, no, you have to follow the state legislation, which says these are the deadlines for the voting. Is that your understanding, or?
Yeah, and that's been kind of, the pandemic to me has been the big excuse with a lot of these Democrat-controlled states too, right? It's like where and everything where you see a lot where the governors, they're like, okay, we want extra time. I won't say that President Trump is 100% right about, when he talks about voter intimidation or voter fraud and things like this, but there's a case to be made about the fact that when you have these extended deadlines, that is right, just sets up a situation for all kinds of nonsense, particularly by the Democrats here. And once again, not into conspiracies here, but there's a long history. I think we can talk about Democrats and votes and stuff like that. That you just.
Well, I think what's been established is that regardless of conspiracies, it seems to be consistent that when there are fewer votes, it tends to favor the Republicans. When there's more votes, it seems to favor the Democrats. That's not really a political statement. That's just the way that things have been. So whether it's right or wrong or what the reasons are for it, it just seems that when more people vote, it seems to go Democratic than when.
All right. So I want to use that actually as a segue. I'm going to jump to something else, which is the voting that has taken place, because I think this is a perfect thing that you're just talking about. We have, depending upon what report you're reading, but I saw one late this afternoon. It was about 80 million people have now voted, either in person or by mail. And the initial feedback they were getting, they were just basically are counting them by registration, Democrat, Republican, other things like that. So we don't know whether or not those people are actually voting straight party line or they're crossing over. They know that because they haven't been counted yet. But the Democrats had a fairly big advantage there. The early voting comes in, and those votes, that advantage seems to be slipping away in a lot of places for the Democrats. But there were just under 137 million votes cast for the presidential election in 2016. We have 80 million now, and we're still 4 days away before the election.
And
I mean, can I say that 100 million votes before election day wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility beforehand, and then maybe another 40 or 50 million on election day, that we will have this huge. I mean, we have something apparently like about, I think there are 240 million people or something like that, that could potentially vote. But so we're going to have a pretty high percentage of registered voters voting for this. So Jeff, with all these huge numbers, will that favor the Democrats, or does Trump have some momentum here that he can offset some of this?
Yeah, so I've not heard any specific figures. My gut is that the mail-in ballots, this is spitball some numbers here. I'm saying like probably 3/4 of mail-in ballots are Democratic, probably 1/4 is a Republican, and there's other ways going to be around for the in-person. I'm going to say 3/4 are Republican, 1/4 is Democratic, just because I think that's kind of how things have been playing out. That's just my personal take on it. But so I think what it really comes down to is getting out the vote. How many people are actually going to go in person, both with early voting and the day of the election? Are the voting stations going to be open? How much is Republicans going to either commit to voting regardless of the lines or risk of COVID or whatever? So I think that this is just a gut feeling that I feel like obviously Democrats have the inertia, and that at this point Republicans really need to commit to voting in person and showing their solidarity from that standpoint. But I don't know. It's going to be. I'm really curious to see the day of the election how the turnout actually is, because if it's a moderate turnout, I think it's going to be hard for Republicans to offset the initial advantage the Democrats have. But if they really do show up in numbers, then I think that's a good sign that they really are going to potentially balance that out. So if we see, to your point about 100,000 before voting, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I'm expecting to be like 180. I'm thinking by the time all the ballots are cast. So how that plays out in final tally, I don't know.
So Jeff, I want to challenge your first statement a little bit because I think that I would say it's going to be more than a 3/4, 1/4. I think it's a little bit more half and half on the number of people from each party voting by mail because of the number of older people, I think, that vote Republican who may not, because of COVID, have felt comfortable physically going to the polls. They may have, whether they wanted to or not, chosen to vote by mail this year. But the other thing that I wanted to say is just based on, and again, this isn't numbers, this is more a feeling, is that you seem to think that people get more aggressive about going out to vote when they're unhappy with the current situation, right? And that if you're looking at it from that perspective, it does seem to feel like, oh my God, all these people are coming out because they want Trump out of office because they're just so over what he's doing. So that's kind of the sentiment that I get from that. I don't think that's necessarily how it's going to shake out. I don't think it's going to be a landslide in either direction. No. But I think those were the two kind of thoughts I had listening to you speak.
Yeah, so I think what I've heard, at least as far as narrative goes, is that a lot of the Democrats seem to think the reason that Trump won last election was because not enough Democrats really cared about the election. They just thought it was going to be a foregone conclusion that they were going to win or something. And so they really didn't show up in force. And so I think that's kind of, pushed them to say, okay, now we really need to show, our that we care. So I think, to your point, I think it's absolutely, when people care about the election, they show up in greater numbers. I think that.
But Jeff, 4 years ago, they did actually show up in large numbers. There's a few people that stayed home, but for the large percentage of Democrats, they went out and voted because they wanted to be able, because you know how woke they are. They want to be, I voted for they would be able to tell their great grandchildren, I voted for the first woman that ran for president. I tell you this, I tell you why I think the president's going to win on election night. I tell you why. The Democrats and the Bidens, I remember living through the 1996 campaign. There was a lot of anger towards Bill Clinton on our side. Anger doesn't win elections. If you recall 2004, the Democrats were very, very angry at that evil, horrible George W. Bush. He did this. He started a war for oil because of Halliburton and Dick Cheney and all that. That didn't work. We won in 2004. I mean, it was not even, and the polls all had John Kerry winning. I mean, I remember seeing a Matt Drudge headline earlier in the days saying that, it's over for President Bush, one and done. And lo and behold, election night came and John Kerry was sitting there conceding with Mrs. Hines and his son, who's Joe Biden's business partner, his stepson.
To not exact quote our good friend Barry O'Connell on his Facebook Maryland Politics group, he said something along the lines of first of all, that all Republicans are horrible people, but then he said that those devils and Bernie Sanders supporters are the reason that Trump won the election because they all stayed home because Bernie didn't win the primary. And I think
but also to your point, Dwight, I'm going to take a little bit of a different take on your thing about Hillary. It's just that, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people, kind of like a la Barack Obama, that wanted to vote for the first Black president, vote for the first female president. But Hillary was so much more unlikable and disliked by so many people compared to, say, a Barack Obama, that also tamped down the vote. And and the polling was showing that she was in the lead. And so I think there are a lot of people who believed that she was going to win this thing, and it wasn't really that important in the end. And they found out that it was, particularly since the popular vote doesn't really matter. That's more bragging rights. It's the Electoral College that that's what we're looking at. I don't care how many Californians vote or how many New Yorkers vote for Hillary or for Joe Biden or things like this. I want to make sure that we get the Republicans voting in the key states, and getting those Electoral College votes, because I don't think that it'll be a miracle in my mind, based on the way things are, for Donald Trump to win the majority of the popular vote. But I think
that's not going to happen. I mean, he's not going to win the popular vote, but I think we'll win at the electoral, because the fact that California, the most populous state, Joe Biden should get close. He'll probably get close to 60, maybe 65% of the vote in California. You've got states like New York where he'll probably get 65%. I mean, that's what it's hard to fight against those population centers like that, so to speak.
And when they ballot harvest.
Well, I wanna loop John in on this because he's the closest by proximity. I have heard whisperings that people are a little bit afraid in the state of Texas that Texas could potentially swing blue. What's your thoughts on that? Is he frozen?
John, can you hear us?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah. About Texas.
Yeah, there's no way Texas is going to go blue.
That's right.
He's gone out there, and you've got Beto O'Rourke that says we're going to take your guns away. And here in Wild Wild West, we love our guns, and if you decide to come after our guns, there's no way in the world we're going to vote for Biden.
And remember, the last Democrat to win Texas, in general for any statewide office, Ann Richards. And she was a gun-toting Democrat.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion, it depends on what you read and the statistics. Everyone can sway the numbers to make it look good. But I've been reading more and more on my various sources that I read that Biden is not as far ahead in terms of percentages as Hillary was at this time, at this stage of the game. Hillary was up, she was guaranteed to win 90%, 95% chance winning at this 4 days to go. She's up 14 points in the polls of all polls. And Biden doesn't have that kind of support that Hillary had from the Latinos, from the Blacks, from most minorities. And that's what I'm reading. Now, I hate to say that, we should become overconfident, but I'm with Dwight. I believe that Trump will see significant numbers on election day. And I don't think it'll be as close as certainly the polls are saying right now. In fact, it's certainly not going to be a Biden win, in my opinion.
Well, we're really
and what you just said, John, that was important, though, because that's one of the things that could rig the key to this election is how President Trump performs with Black voters and with the Latinos. I mean, I had this on the list, and I don't have to really say much about it, except, he's got those rappers behind, some of these rappers behind him.
Yeah.
I find that to be hilarious. Okay.
Absolutely.
Little Wayne and Little Bow Wow are both endorsed.
I mean, 50 Cent was behind him until, what was it? Chelsea Handler, raked on him or something like that. And so
the definition of racism, by the way, is telling somebody that they have to do something because of the color of their skin, that they can't think for themselves because of the color of their skin. Do they not realize that they are actually the racist in this situation? Because I find that a little bit ironic.
Jackie, that reminds me of a Mad TV bit they did when Bush and Kerry were up. And Al Roker was one of the people that had to Al Roker go, I'm Black and it's the law. I have to vote Democrat. I mean, that is really how Democrats feel about Black people in America.
It's really sad, actually.
And it's sickening. It's like, they're going to vote for us no matter what we do to them.
Yeah, I think we're going to see quite the surprise from the Black vote this time around. I really do. It'll be.
I think he gets 20%, John.
There are these shocked polls. I mean, Rasmussen came out with a shocked poll. It said there's a 30% support from the Black community for Trump. I mean, that is damning.
That's like President Nixon got 30% of the vote, of the Black vote.
Right, since the Nixon era, where Trump would be that close, and even if it was half of that, if he doubles his Black support, there's no way that Pennsylvania he'll lose Pennsylvania or Florida or Ohio or Iowa. That's impossible.
So step back from the presidential election for a second. I want to hear your guys' because we're coming up on the end of the show, and I guess this kind of ties into the prediction thing. I want to hear your predictions about both the Senate and the House. I think there's very low chance, unfortunately, that we can take back the House, but the Senate, I think, is going to be very, very close on which way seats go in a lot of particular races. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Well, I think we hold the Senate, but we lose. We're not going to take the House. But I think 2 years from now, Nancy Pelosi should be polishing up her resume, for minority whip, when she applies for that role.
So Dwight, give us some numbers. Senate.
Okay, Senate, North Carolina, numbers are going in the right direction. We're going to hold on to North Carolina. I think Susan Collins is going to hang in there in Maine. They love Susan Collins in Maine. They don't hate Maine folks are not like Washington folks. And it's like, where we live in Maryland, DC, Northern Virginia, you got a lot of hyperbolic, partisan, in Maine, they don't, the Democrats and Republicans don't hate each other, like around here, it's like, I think I think McSally, if the president wins Arizona, she holds on and wins in Arizona. So, John, you'll have your senator will win re-election.
I'm not so convinced about McSally.
McSally, you're not. I think
Yeah,
if
I mean, I voted for her. I want her to win.
What I'm trying to get to, Dwight, is what's the number for the Senate? I mean, is
51-49.
One, like, to hold it 52.
51-49.
51-49. That's okay. What about the House? Gain or loss?
I think I hate to say it, we're probably going to be down like maybe 4 seats, because I know Congressman King's seat, we're most likely not going to hold that. Thank you, Pete, for retiring. You could have stuck it out for 2 more years,
You love your New Yorkers, Dwight.
The Will Hurd seat is going away. I hate to say it, but I don't think we're gonna. I think we're gonna lose. What's that? I think the Darrell Issa. He may squeak through, but that's like a toss-up in the Darrell Issa seat in California.
Well, he's out. He's coming. I think was he coming back? He was.
Yeah, that's right. He is coming back. So so that'll be a Democrat hold. So that's not But the Will Hurd seat and the Peter King seat both worry me, as well as there's a lot of Republicans that retired. I think the Michigan seat where what's his name, the independent former Republican,
Justin Amash.
Yes, I think that's going to be a tough one to hold on to for us. I think we've got some great candidates in Maryland. I think Chris Palumbi, any other year, he'd give Steny Hoyer a run for his money. But I think just because it's Maryland and the way his district is, you got a lot of just bigoted Democrats who won't even give a Republican a second look, quite frankly.
Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to win his race this year, but I really hope that doesn't,
I hope he runs again for either states.
If he runs again in a different year, he has a really good shot because he is an amazing.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think that COVID and everything really hurt these challengers like that.
Mm-hmm.
In a more normal cycle, that they would have stood a much better chance. I think Neil would stand a much better chance against Trump, in a more normal year. But when you really can't meet and greet people and do the things that you need to do to get some awareness.
And I think the message for Neil's campaign really should be, you're voting for Nancy Pelosi and San Francisco values. She does not share, David Trone and Nancy Pelosi do not share the values of Western Maryland. David Trone was going to be voting for, what's his name? His name slips on mine. The congressman from District 8 in Maryland, Jamie Raskin. That's who David Trone was going to be voting for. One of the most radical members of the United States House of Representatives. That is who David Trone is going to vote. So think about that. David Trone could vote for Gregory Cole, but he's not going to vote for Gregory Cole. He's going to vote for Jamie Raskin, who has that same San Francisco elitist value system that Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, and all the other Democrats, and they all vote for Speaker Pelosi.
I also heard, and this doesn't affect this election cycle, I think AOC might try to challenge Chuck Schumer.
I hope so. I want to see that.
Well, I mean, I saw that. The last report I saw about AOC was just that, she made a statement or, alluded to the fact that she doesn't want to stay in Congress, forever, but not necessarily looking at the Senate, maybe angling if Biden wins for a cabinet position.
Yeah. I also read that her outfits wearing that Vanity Fair spread cost $14,000 because that's
what she Fox called her out on that, and then she came back and said, "Well, I had to return the clothes. They're just borrowed."
I tell you, everybody watching us should fear AOC having any type of cabinet position. Anything.
I fear it as a Jewish person because I don't need anyone else blood talking in her ear. I'm not fond of tattoos. I'd rather not get one with an ID number on my arm.
And Bernie Sanders wants to be labor secretary.
Let the others give us their Senate and House predictions. Jeff?
So the same site that I was referring to before, the 270 to win, that is a presidential one, also has House and Senate. It was House and House and Senate predictions. So it's really tough to call. My gut, and again, this is not I hate to say it, but I think a couple of Houses seats are going to flip. My prediction is that it's going to go slightly Democratic. I think it's going to be 51 Democrat to 49 Republicans, just because I feel like that's kind of the momentum. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that seems to be, I'll predict that. So as for that, the actual House, the House, I don't know. I'm not too worried about it. I think I think it's going to have less impact because I don't think it's going to change parties at this point. I think it's going to stay Democratic. So I think it may get a few Republican representatives, but I don't think it's going to change parties. So that's my prediction.
Right.
Don, what's your prediction?
Okay.
I don't know about the House to know. There's too many members. Everyone's loved where they are. So it probably will stay kind of the same. I would suspect that if Trump wins, the down ballot will obviously help. And so you may pick up a couple seats. I don't know if it changes hands, however, but for the Senate, I still think we're going to hold. There are a couple vulnerable Democrat seats, in Alabama is one of them, particularly Doug Jones. So I can see where in North Carolina with Tillis and Cunningham, I believe his name is. Tillis is now up in the lead again. He's up by 5 because of Cunningham's issues. So I can see where we still hold the Senate, probably 51, 52, 48, 49. That's going to be really, really important because Trump needs that Senate when he wins a second term.
Don, what's
Those
your
are the justices. Go ahead.
prediction, Don?
Yeah, so I'm also at 51-49. I mean, I think that Doug Jones is toast, and I'm hoping that Peters gets John James beats Peters in Michigan to kind of offset the probable loss. I'm with John on McSally. She hasn't been a great candidate. She's done better lately, but she just isn't a great candidate. So there's not a compelling reason to reelect her except for Republicans, except for the fact she's an R.
Yeah.
On the House side, I was reading a Wall Street Journal article the other day that after there's actually the Republicans are actually doing fairly well in the House races in California. There are a lot of seats flipped in 2018, and they're making some decent inroads. So optimistically, maybe when all is said and done, Republicans will pick up 2 to 4 seats in the House. It's not enough, obviously, to flip it, but it's a little bit of progress if they can do that, at least for now, and then plot for what happens 2 years from now. So that's kind of where we are now, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on track with all of you guys. I think we'll narrowly keep the Senate. I don't think there's any potential way that we flip the House. My only hope is that there's no scenario in which the Democrats control the executive branch and the legislature.
By the way, if that does happen, there's going to be a reckoning with the John Wilkes Booth Project Republicans. Quite frankly, there's going to be a reckoning with them. Quite frankly, like we have our former lieutenant governor and MSNBC spokesman and chairman of the RNC who basically just ruined the RNC when he was chairman, but with cost overruns and everything. Folks like him and Connie Morella and Wayne Gilchrist. I mean, there's gonna be a reckoning for all you folks, that can't bring yourself to vote. Remember this: we held our noses and voted for John McClain. We held our noses and voted for Mitt Romney. Remember that, guys. You guys, we're all on the same team, but not anymore. We're gonna have if we lose control of the House and Senate and lose the presidency, we're not gonna blame we're gonna blame you guys. And so we're gonna have a civil war in the Republican Party, and it's not gonna end well for you guys.
All right. Well, we are already past 8 o'clock. I want
Final thoughts.
to hear more about kind of our reactions to what's happening or what we do know, at least by Wednesday night. Tune into our sister show, Direct Line Live. That's on Wednesday at 7:30. We're going to be giving you, our reactions. Maybe we'll have a reaction to who won the presidency. Maybe we won't. We don't know where we're going to be by that point, but we'll definitely be reacting to something. This has been Dr. Politics.
Final thoughts. We have to do final thoughts, Jackie.
Well, I thought our final thoughts were our predictions.
No. We got to do
all right.
Final thoughts,
Dwight, what's your final thoughts?
Dwight still has more to say, Jackie.
I got 2 final thoughts as usual. My first final thought is this. We got a lot of great Republicans running in Maryland. Neil Parrott, is running in 6th. And just remember, Western Maryland Democrats, David Trone doesn't share your values. He shares San Francisco values of Nancy Pelosi. Remember that. He's going to vote for Jamie Raskin. Would you vote for Jamie Raskin if you lived in District 8? I don't think so. And my other final thought is, we are getting to the Christmas season and the Hanukkah season. Help out the United States Marine Corps Toys for Tots Drive. Donate an unwrapped toy for them. And it's, this is going to be a tough year for the Toys for Tots and the needy families of the greater DC, Maryland area.
Everyone could use a little bit of holiday spirit this year. So,
Or spirits.
Final thought.
Yeah, so obviously this has been a very interesting year, both with COVID and everything else that's going on. But I guess I'd say encourage everyone to not get too inflamed. And I know we all love talking about politics, but the human condition is much more serious, and taking care of our brothers and sisters in need, whatever their race, color, or political leanings. This has been both a trying time and a time where people have come together. So with great trials comes great opportunities for taking care of each other. So I just encourage people to not let this get too much under your skin. Whoever wins is, we'll have challenges either way, but let's focus on taking care of our neighbors. So,
John.
I think we should all be encouraged to find our independents and our undecideds. I've met with half a dozen undecided so far, and then we have 4 days to go. Find a couple more and just give them the down low. I think it's important. It's vital for our country. With regards to COVID, I don't think we should get to the point where we fear COVID. I think we're going to learn to have to live with it, and we all will live with it. We have a lot of great technologies to take care of folks with regards to COVID.
Don.
Yeah, I think those are all great thoughts. I'm going to finish with a final kind of criticism or maybe karma for the Girl Scouts this week. They tweeted out congratulations to Justice Barrett for as part of the females, joining on the Supreme Court. And they got roundly criticized by the cancel culture of the left. And so they removed the post. They caved into the cancel culture. Shame on them. I'm not a big fan of the Girl Scouts to begin with for lots of reasons. Conservatives generally aren't. But, they didn't do anything wrong initially by sending out that tweet. But boy, that's all. It doesn't take much to trigger the left, even with someone that they're kind of in bed with anyway. Yep.
My final thought was not as deep as any of yours. The season 6 premiere of Superstore was fire. It was great. I know some of their themes are very leftist at times, but I was really, really looking forward to watching this season because for anyone who doesn't know the premise of the show, it's about people who work in basically like a Walmart type store. So seeing how they took COVID and put that into the storyline, because it very much is the entire storyline for the season at this point, even though that's not what they were planning to begin with. It's really, it's a funny show. I highly recommend it, but it's really fascinating to watch that play out on TV and to start to see COVID in the storylines of shows that we were already watching pre-COVID. So that's my final thought. It's on Hulu. Check it out. All right. So this has been Dr. Politics. We'll be back on Wednesday for Direct Line Live, where you'll hear as much reaction as we can give you for the time being. And then, sorry, my mom is calling me. And then we'll be back here next Friday to talk about hopefully final reactions. I should hope by next Friday we should know something more concrete. But we'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.